But I do want to tackle a topic that I'm sure has been on many people's minds, and that is how to cope with difficult times, whether it's difficult times because there's a war happening in Israel, or whether it's difficult times because of personal issues. But I know that no life is smooth sailing, and everyone experiences difficult times. So really, the question is, what does Judaism say about coping, or how to cope in difficult times? So I want to present to you really 4 different perspectives today. And again, afterwards, we can open this up to any questions you may have on this topic or on any other topic, except for, that's right, very good, excellent. Okay, all right. So in general, there are 4 tools that Judaism gives us to empower us during difficult times. Tool number 1 is a tool that's not spoken of enough, and that's the tool of prayer. Now, in many, many ways, we learn this from an interesting Talmudic discussion about when Jews should start praying for rain at the onset of the winter season in Israel, in the Holy Land of Israel. The answer is that they should start praying for rain on the 7th of Cheshvan, of the month of the Hebrew month of Cheshvan. And that's what they do until this very day. In Israel, they begin praying for rain and inserting that prayer in our Amidah prayer every day for rain on the 7th of Cheshvan. Why the 7th? So that's a good question. That changes. No problem. No, please do. Please do. And this is what it's about. You know, you have to ask questions, and it's more of a discussion than anything else. But it depends on the year, because we follow the lunar calendar and the Gregorian calendar follows the solar calendar. It depends really on the year. This year, well, it's usually, let me put it this way, the 7th of Cheshvan is usually sometime in October. Okay? Now, the question is, why that date? What's special about that 7th day of the month of Cheshvan, that's when we start asking for rain? And the answer, as the Talmud says, really comes from the times in which the Jerusalem temple stood erect in Jerusalem. Then we would go as Jews to that temple 3 times a year during the 3 festivals, on Sukkot, on Passover, and on Shavuot. Now, it would take about 2 weeks for Jews to leave Israel, leave the border of Israel, to go back to their homes after those pilgrimages. 2 weeks after Sukkot is the 7th of Cheshvan. And therefore, we delay the prayer for rain until the 7th of Cheshvan, so that we don't pray for rain and all of a sudden, immediately after Sukkot, and all of a sudden it rains on people who are still walking back home. So we want them to leave the border of Israel, be safe, and then we can start asking for rain so that it won't get caught in storms and in mud and so on and so forth. Now, what does this teach us? It teaches us 2 major lessons. Number 1, a lesson in Ahavat Israel, in loving your fellows yourself. That we are willing to delay what is so vital, especially in the land of Israel, to our fruits, to our vegetables, to our crops, just for the comfort of a fellow Jew, so that he doesn't get caught in rain on his way back home. That in of itself is a massive lesson in love. But there's another lesson here, and that is that prayer works. Because if prayer wouldn't work, we would start immediately after Sukkot. It doesn't work anyway, so it's not going to rain, so people are not going to get stuck anyhow. But prayer works. We really believe that prayer works. And when we'll start asking for rain, because prayer works, rain will start to fall. So we delay that request for rain, that prayer for rain, for 2 weeks, because we know again that prayer works. And therefore, tool number 1 during any type of difficult times is to pray. We really believe that prayer works, and that God sometimes just wants to hear what we want. Not that he doesn't know, but he wants to hear from us. Like a good parent would want to hear from their child. What is it that I know what you want, but I'm going to let you do the asking, not me. And once we ask, then God fulfills our prayers. Now that's that element of prayer. Just asking, because asking or prayer works. But there's a deeper element, and that's the element of faith. What prayer does is that really it enables us to look at life differently, to look at life as if we are not the only ones in control. but God is also in control too. And just knowing that there's a higher power, as they call it in the AA program, a higher power that really navigates this world in the best of ways, even though sometimes we can't see because of our limited human vision, we can't see those mysterious ways. But we believe that they are guided by that higher power in the best of ways, and that in of itself really soothes our spirit and adds tranquility and peace of mind to our lives. That's the power really of prayer. I'm reminded of the great Hasidic story of this Hasidic Jew who was visited by his friends because the founder of the Hasidic movement, the Baal Shem Tov, told his friends to go and see how he prays. And of course, because he knows how to pray. And it was quite fascinating what they saw. So these friends go to their friend who knows how to pray according to the Baal Shem Tov, and they see him during prayer writing 2 lists. That's how he would pray every day. In one list, he would write everything that he did wrong during the past day, week, or month. He would say, "Dear God, I lied a little bit. Dear God, I don't pray enough. Dear God, I wasn't nice to my wife and to my children." He would have a list like that. And then he would take out another list. And on that other list, he would write down what he thinks God did wrong. God, you made my child sick for no reason. Dear God, you didn't make my ends meet. I don't have food on the table. God, this was wrong of you, and that was wrong of you, and this was wrong of you, and that was wrong of you. And then he turned to God, and this is how we would pray. And we'd say to God, you know what, God? I forgive you for your list. You forgive me for my list. Let's start the day anew. And in many, many ways, when you know that you have that other partner with you, God himself, it alleviates a lot of the stress. Because you know that God is there for you, with you. And that in of itself is an element of prayer that I think is so soothing and comforting and empowering during difficult times. So that's tool number 1, prayer. We can elaborate on this, but I'm going to go to tool 2, 3, and 4, and then we can open this up. Tool number 2, I would say, is the tool of finding the good even in the bad, or silver lining, as they call it. To know that, yes, even though things during difficult times especially might seem completely bad, completely dark, there is always some sparks of light in the darkness, some silver lining in the clouds, and yes, even some good in the bad. I think we saw that on October 7th. I think just a mere fact, think about this. October 7th could have been much, much, much worse. Army experts are saying this now. October 7th, these Hamas terrorists were prepared not just to spew their evil and destruction in the southern border of Israel on all of those kibbutzes from Be'eri to Re'im and so on, but also they were prepared to go to Tel Aviv. They were prepared to go to Beersheba. They were prepared to go all the way even up to Haifa. And some of them actually were caught, individuals. Thank God they didn't have teams with them. Were caught not too far away from these big cities. But God stopped them. For some mysterious reasons, they didn't continue. For some mysterious reasons, they didn't go to other big cities like Netivot, which is right in the southern border, or even Beersheba, again, as mentioned. So there's a silver lining there, maybe pointing to the fact that, yes, there's some good in all of this bad. There's God's hand, even when we're upset at God, and we can protest this bad towards God. So there's that element that also, I think, strengthens us. And I think, by the way, we find that in prayer, speaking of prayer, when we ask God, it's just an interesting prayer, but we ask God every single day before the Shema prayer and we sing this here at CBT, V'ha'er eneinu b'toratecha. In other words, illuminate our eyes. V'ha'er eneinu. God, give us light in our eyes. What does that mean? Give us light in our eyes. That's literally what this means. What? V'ha'er eneinu. We're asking for some sunlight. We need to have our eyes tan also. That's right. To be able to see what? Light. So bring light into our eyes so that when we look at the world, we don't see darkness. We see light. V'ha'er eneinu. It's a very powerful prayer, but it's a prayer in many, many, many ways that speaks about this second tool of seeing light, even in darkness, and clinging to that light so that we know that eventually it will prevail. And in many ways, I think I've found that in the streets of Israel. I've been now to Israel 4 times since October 7th. And that has been the perspective of every Israeli without any exclusion that I've met. They always are choosing to look at light and at life and at the joy in everything. I mean, you talk to people whose families are in Gaza at war. You talk to people who've lost it all. And yet they found the good in everything. And from that, they derive strength. I'm most comforted, and I don't know if I shared with you the story of Rachel Malka Vaknin, who only had 2 children, Michael and Oshri Vaknin, who were the DJs of the Nova Festival. And they were both murdered by the terrorists there. And she's now all alone in this world. Her husband died a few years ago, and she really has no immediate relative in the world. And shortly after October 7th, I flew to Israel and I visited her. I went to see her as she was sitting Shiva. And she was broken. Someone filmed it for me. She was broken and she was saying, I'm all alone in this world. And levad ba'olam. And then she turned around and she saw those hundreds of Jews, some of which didn't even know her, who came to comfort her. But then she said, but when I look at this, I know that I'm not alone. And I know that I have strength to overcome this. And here I see a woman who could have indeed wallowed in her pain and never come out of it. But what does she choose to do? To find the silver lining, to say, well, look, I have my people with me. And with them, I'm going to come out even stronger. So that's a tool that we learn, especially today, from these heroic people in the Holy Land, from our brothers and sisters who face such hardships, yet always know to find the good in the bad. That's tool number 2. Tool number 3, I would say, is the tool that the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory would emphasize greatly, and that's the tool of action. Doing, not just being. Being engaged in deeds, not just being engaged in our own personal feelings. You know, the great story, and I've shared it many times, but it's a story that shares volumes of wisdom. It's a story about Rabbi Allouche, the chief rabbi of Israel, who was then the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv in 1973. Shortly after the Yom Kippur War, he went to visit the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe was interested to hear from Rabbi Allouche what the mood is in the streets of Tel Aviv and of Israel altogether. And Rabbi Allouche said to him, look, Rabbi, I will tell you that the mood can be really expressed by 2 words that everyone is saying in Israel right now. 2 words, a 2-question word. A 2-word question, that everyone is asking. Rabbi says, what's that question? Rabbi Allouche says everyone is asking the question of Ma ihiyeh, what will be? And the Rebbe apparently became very, very serious. He grabbed Rabbi Allouche's arm and he said to him, Rabbi Allouche, I'm surprised. Ma ihiyeh is not a Jewish question. What will be is not a Jewish question. So Rabbi Allouche says, so what is a Jewish question? And the Rebbe says, what is a Jewish question? Ma na'aseh. What are we going to do about it? That's the question. Not what will be. What will be is a passive question that doesn't help in any shape or form. What we'll do about it is an active question that leads you to create a change. So focus on deed. And by focusing on deed, even though we experienced the worst war in the history of the modern state of Israel in Yom Kippur in 1973, we will come out of this even stronger. And in many, many ways, I think that's true on a very personal level. Sometimes we wallow in our feelings and it doesn't help. We have to do it, keep ourselves busy with good deeds. And that in of itself sparks hope and promise. Yeah. Oh, very good. Very, very good. Exactly. Human doings, and I'll go further. You can tell Charles. Yeah, human doings grow. Human beings never grow because they remain who they are. They're beings. And really, in order to not just grow ourselves, but to create growth, we have to be human doings. I love that. Not human beings. And that really has been the approach, if you think about it, of all of the greats of Jewish history throughout history. After every tragedy, we've responded to every tragedy with deeds. Deeds that ensured that we will come out of this destruction with construction, with a brighter and better and greater future. And that really has been the approach, especially of the Rebbe, who would very, very, very often quote the Mishnah in the Ethics of Our Fathers that says that Hamaaseh hua ikar, the deed is the most important thing. Hamaaseh hua ikar. So that's tool number 3. Share with you the quick story. I don't know if I've shared it with you, so if I'm repeating myself, which I do often, then please stop me. But this is a story about how in 1957, a terrible terrorist attack was launched in the village of Kfar Chabad, just outside of Ben Gurion Airport. And these evil terrorists murdered 2 teachers, I think 3 students, and injured many, many, many more. And the village of Kfar Chabad was a new village. But when this happened, the leaders of this village thought of maybe just closing shop, saying maybe it's too dangerous of a place that we chose. We shouldn't have this village. These terrorists came and just butchered us. So they asked, again, the Lubavitcher Rebbe what they should do. And back then, we didn't have emails. Remember those days? We had telegrams, not emails or phones. They had telegrams. And the Rebbe responded with a 3-word telegram. Those 3 words were, Behemshech abinyan tenuchamu, which means by continuing to build, you will find comfort. And in those 3 words, the Rebbe shared the whole philosophy of Judaism in times that are difficult. We may think that we should be overcome by those destructions and therefore run away. No. Respond to destruction with construction, because by continuing to build, you will find comfort. Do, and do more, and eventually you'll find comfort. That's tool number 3. And then tool number 4, which is a tool that I actually just learned from a musician in Israel, just so beautiful, such words of wisdom. And by the way, just FYI, if you are planning to go to Israel in the near future or in the far future, you should heed the advice of my beloved Rabbi, Dean Steinsaltz, of blessed memory, who would often tell people that when you go to Israel, you think that you're going to be inspired by Masada and the Kotel and all of these nice touristic attractions. Yes, you might be inspired there too, but you'll be most inspired by the people in the streets. And you should eavesdrop on conversations, and you'll hear so much wisdom. And what Rabbi Steinsaltz would also tell you to do is take a notebook and write down those conversations and those words of wisdom that you heard from the people of the streets, because that will inspire you much more than any of those touristic attractions, which is very true, by the way. There's so much wisdom in the streets of Israel. But about now, 3 weeks ago, I was on a solidarity mission in Israel, and I went to Ben Yehuda. You know what Ben Yehuda is in Jerusalem? One of the main streets, so there are many pedestrian streets and many street performers, as they call them. And there was a street performer there, a saxophonist, who played just the saxophone so beautifully, so masterfully. So I waited for him to finish, and then I went and I spoke with him. And I asked him, what's your background? Where do you learn saxophone? And so on and so forth. And why do you do this? So he was from Russia. I'm not going to tell you about his whole life story. And when I asked him, why do you do this? He said, because I want to bring joy to the people of my street on Ben Yehuda. And then he continued and he said, because I understand that this is how the world works. In order to change the world and bring joy to the world, you have to start with your street. After your street is filled with joy, then your city will be filled with joy. After your city is filled with joy, then your country will be filled with joy. And after your country will be filled with joy, the whole world will be filled with joy. But it starts on your street. And I think that that's such a powerful lesson, because very often when times are difficult, especially like today, when we are so worried about anti-Semitism on campuses and the war in Israel and what is happening in politics and in so many other areas, we say to ourselves, gosh, we're doomed. And here comes one saxophonist with so much wisdom who tells you, no, you're not doomed. You have the power to change the world. But instead of focusing on the macro, on thinking that, oh, no, we need this politician to do that, and this philanthropist to do that, and this billionaire to do that, and we need to influence the whole world on the macro, that usually doesn't work. You know what does work? Focus on the person next to you, on your neighbor, on your street. If you can change your street, then you will be able to change your city, your country, and the world altogether. The micro influences the macro much, much, much more than the macro may influence the micro. That's the truth of life, and it's a truth that Judaism teaches time and time again. And we see that at the beginning of Jewish history. Moses, who was perhaps our first real national leader, Abraham was more, maybe the first true, but a world leader. Moses was really the leader who related to our nation and took our nation out. So maybe he was the first national leader that we had. But Moses was picked as the leader of our nation. You know why? Because he cared about one sheep, not even a human being, one sheep. When God saw that he cares about one sheep and he wants to influence one sheep, God said, that will make a good leader, because he knows the value of the micro, and he knows how the micro can eventually change the world. What's the story? The story, as the Midrash puts it, is that Moses was a shepherd in the mountains of Ethiopia. And one day, one of his sheep left his flock, and he decided to run after the sheep. Most shepherds would say, this is a rebellious sheep. Well, let him die, let a wolf eat him up. But not Moses. He ran after the sheep, was looking for him everywhere, and he found the sheep drinking from a stream of water. And what he did is that he carried that sheep, and he said to him, to the sheep, I'm so sorry. If I had known that you were thirsty, I would have given you some water. And he caresses him and brings the sheep back to the flock. When God saw that, he said, this is the type of leader I want. Someone who cares for the micro with such love, tenderness, and kindness, that will be a person that can then spread that love and tenderness and kindness to the entire world. That really is the truth. I will share with you just a personal story. Maybe I'll end with this and then open this up to your questions. But look, I think first and foremost, this CBT is, thank God, still at its very early stage and at its very beginning of growth. But Baruch Hashem, we came to this building and we were growing as a community. Why? Because everyone in this community understands this message, that it's the power of the micro, of us influencing just the next person and them influencing the next person and creating a ripple effect that really eventually grows community. But I'm going to share with you just a quick story, and I'm only sharing the story to emphasize this point. But I have a friend, his name is Chris Weiner. He's not Jewish, and he's a motivational speaker. He's a good guy. And he tells me about 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, he tells me, Rabbi, I have to have you meet this pastor in town. You're going to enjoy this meeting. So I said, fine. I don't really want to go, but I went. And we had a good coffee at the Starbucks in Kierland. And I'm sitting down with him, and we hit it off. We became friends. Until today, we're very close. This pastor is the pastor of a very big church in North Scottsdale. And ever since October 7th, he's been showering me with blessings and messages. But it doesn't end there. Shortly after our meeting, he wanted to be put on my newsletter. So now he shares every time I speak about Israel, he shares my newsletter with the members of his church. And I can't tell you how many members of his church have either called the office, you can ask Andrea and Desiree, called the office, or even sent bouquets of flowers to show their support and their friendship. And I'm saying to myself, look how beautiful this is. I don't want to go to that coffee, remember. But I said, you know what? The power of the micro. So I went. And through that, we can really create positive change, a ripple effect that fills this world with love, tenderness, and kindness. And that's what we ought to do, instead of being obsessed with the news and gluing ourselves to our TV screens and asking my yeah and saying, we got to go and influence that leader and this leader, and we got to lobby everywhere, and we have to be on the macro level because that's where change is created. Judaism will come and tell you you're wrong. It starts with micro, with a neighbor next door, with your friend, with your social network. And eventually, again, if you change your street, you'll change your city, you'll change your country, and you'll change the world.